The plainest way I can say what we see is we see an extreme. There are members of the public and members of the media who are convinced that every public official is a criminal. But on the flip side of that extreme, you have public officials that don't like the public. Of the probably 200 cases out of 6,000 that have gone to court, courts have upheld us in about 70% of the cases that we, some are dismissed, some they just overturn us outright. We see a lot. The last piece is, and again it ties to this person's question, unfortunately in the past when someone would appeal to us, if they just wrote appeal, we let them in the door. Court said, can't do that. If an agency denies you for 5 reasons and the citizen cites 4, you don't get in the door. So you set up a situation where you have a citizen against a chief counsel. So we, where you almost do need a lawyer in some ways. We're pushing very hard. There's a lot of progress, but at the end of the day, the deck is stacked against the citizen.
By default, everything is open unless there is an exception for it. What we have now is when we get complaints in New Jersey, a citizen can either complain to the Government Records Council, which is free and no cost, or they can go to court. And we have some people that go to court. We have some folks that go to the GRC itself. But at the end of the day, right now, what we're seeing is pretty much just outlier type records. People who are challenging if a government records custodian says a record does not exist.
When you're saying what you're saying, you mean the appeal body?
What the appeal process, what the Government Records Council and the courts are now seeing, I think generally are outliers. There are always exceptions. You're going to have some people that still don't want to buy into the fact that, okay, it's government records, they're supposed to be open. Government officials are not government employees are not necessarily being evil when they deny records. You pointed out before, I think Bill did that, sometimes they don't want to do, their bosses don't want records released, and, they're not going to do anything that's going to tick their bosses off too much. And
first, I'd say don't bother with informal requests, and if you do decide to, make them brief. I recently made a request with a city office informally with a source who I trust, and I was told that I should request it informally, that would probably be the most successful way to do it, that if the law department got to it, that it would have to work through this very lengthy process. And so I decided to do that, and it ended up taking, first, it was delayed informally for a month, and I just kept being told, we need another week, we need another week. And then eventually, after a month, I decided to make a formal request for it. I was told, first they get 5 days to respond to it. After that, they asked for an additional 30 days, and then they asked for 2 more requests after that passed. And so I just got it a few days ago, and by that point, 3 months had passed.
What kind of a grade do you give the Nutter administration on openness?
Maybe a B-, if I'm going to give it a specific grade.
Okay, well, we just heard they're releasing lots of data. Where do the demerits come from? Well,
first I'll say the good things. I really do give the Nutter administration high marks for releasing these huge data sets recently. I mentioned the L&I stuff. I mean, it's just a ridiculous amount of records on, everything from demolitions to, permits and licenses. They also released a lot of information on crime recently. And then I think the bravest data set that they did was they released all of the records on the new property tax reassessments. And for anyone not from Philly, Philly is in the midst of overhauling its property tax assessment system, and so they just reassessed every property in the city. And the city literally just released the whole data set online for anyone to get, journalists, everyday citizens, politicians who don't like, the overhaul. And I think that I really give them high marks for doing that. I think that the administration sometimes appears, or I worry that they either delay requests or deny them in not in good faith.